Hey everyone, and welcome back for another deep dive with us.
Always fun to be back.
Today we're diving into empathy.
Ooh, that's a good one.
Yeah, I'm excited about this one.
Yeah.
It's something that I think we hear a lot about these days,
Right.
but I think it's worth kind of unpacking and really looking at what it is.
Yeah, and how we can actually use it
Exactly.
in our lives.
Yeah, so whether you're like prepping for some kind of tough conversation at work,
Oh, yeah.
or trying to, understand a loved one better, or you're just fascinated by, how the human mind works.
Absolutely.
This deep dive is for you.
Yeah, this is going to be good.
So to help us unpack all of this, we've gathered a whole bunch of different sources.
We have.
We've got videos from psychologists and communication coaches.
We even have a TED Talk in there.
Oh, yeah, TED Talk.
Gotta love a good TED Talk.
So our mission today is to help you understand what empathy is, and maybe more importantly, what it isn't.
Right, because there are a lot of misconceptions out there.
Yes, and we want to look at how it works, the nuts and bolts of empathy.
The neuroscience of it all.
Yeah, and why it matters in our daily lives.
I think that's the key takeaway here.
Yeah, so let's dive right in.
Let's do it.
First things first, what even is empathy?
Right, that's the big question.
So I was watching this life hacker video, and they define empathy as an active attempt to understand another person's perspective, their emotions, and, in essence, their reality.
That's interesting.
What do you think about that definition?
I think that's a pretty solid starting point
Okay.
because it highlights that empathy is not passive.
Right.
It's not just a feeling that washes over us. It's something that we actively do.
It's a choice.
Exactly. It's a choice.
It takes effort.
It takes effort and skill to step outside of our own experience and try to see the world through someone else's eyes.
It's like that saying, walk a mile in their shoes.
Oh, yeah. Classic.
But it's more than just imagining, right?
Right. It's deeper than that.
We came across this video by a communication coach named Alexander Lyon,
Okay, I've heard of him.
and he really emphasized this point about connecting with the other person's emotions.
Okay, so feeling what they're feeling.
Yeah.
Well,
Even if it's different from what we might feel in that same situation.
right, because our reactions might be totally different.
Exactly.
But we're trying to tap into their experience.
And this is where I think things get really interesting,
Mm-hmm.
because we're not just talking about some, nice idea here.
Right. It's not just about being polite.
We're talking about actual changes that happen in our brains when we empathize with someone.
Oh, yeah. The neuroscience is fascinating.
There's this research on mirror neurons that Helen Rees talks about in her TEDx talk. Have you heard about this?
Oh, yeah. Mirror neurons are amazing.
They totally blew my mind when I first learned about them.
Right. It's like our brains are literally mirroring the experiences of others.
Yeah, so these neurons fire both when we do something ourselves and when we see someone else doing the same thing.
Exactly. So, like, if you see someone get hurt,
Oh, yeah.
you might wince, even though it wasn't happening to you. That's your brain's empathy circuits firing.
It's wild.
Isn't it?
There was this one study that Rees mentioned in her talk that I thought was really interesting.
Oh, yeah. Tell me about it.
They put these women in brain scanners, and they told them that their partner was going to receive an electric shock.
Oh, wow. That's intense.
I know, right? And even though the women themselves weren't being shocked, their brains lit up in the pain centers,
As if they were experiencing the pain themselves.
almost as strongly as if they were being shocked.
That's incredible.
That's wild to think about.
It really is.
So, okay, we've established that empathy is an active process
It's a choice.
and that our brains are actually designed for it.
Yeah, we're wired for connection.
But does that mean everyone experiences empathy in the same way?
That's a good question.
Or is there like an empathy spectrum?
I like that, an empathy spectrum.
Based on the sources that we've been looking at, it seems like there is.
Yeah, it definitely seems that way.
Some people just seem to have like a greater capacity for empathy than others.
Right, they're just naturally more tuned in to other people's emotions.
And like any skill, I think it can also be developed with practice.
Absolutely, practice makes progress.
The Psychology Element video that we watched actually listed some signs that someone might be lacking in empathy.
Oh, interesting, like what?
Things like making jokes at inappropriate times,
Okay, yeah, I can see that.
constantly interrupting others, or just being super focused on their own needs.
Right, so basically a lack of awareness of the people around them.
Yeah. What do you think about that?
I think those are definitely some red flags.
Right.
But, it's important to remember that those behaviors don't always mean someone lacks empathy.
Right.
There could be other things going on.
Like what?
Well, maybe they're just having a really bad day.
Oh, yeah.
Or maybe they're struggling with some personal issues that are making it hard for them to be present for others.
Okay, that makes sense.
But it does raise the question of whether empathy is something we're born with or something we learn.
Nature versus nurture.
Exactly. What do you think?
Well, Robert Greene, in one of his videos, compares empathy to a muscle.
Interesting analogy.
And he says that if we don't exercise that muscle regularly,
It can get weak.
it can weaken or atrophy.
Use it or lose it.
So he talks about how important it is to constantly engage in perspective taking and connecting with others on an emotional level.
So it's an ongoing process.
Yeah, it's not just a one and done kind of thing.
It's a lifelong practice.
But here's where things get really interesting.
Oh, I love a good plot twist.
The Healthy Gamer G video had this surprising take on empathy. And I have to say, it kind of blew my mind.
Okay, I'm intrigued.
They said that too much empathy can actually be harmful.
Whoa, hold on. Too much of a good thing.
Right, you'd think that more empathy is always better.
Right.
But it turns out there can be such a thing as too much.
So how does that work?
The video talks about this concept called emotional contagion.
Emotional contagion.
Which is basically like catching a virus, but with emotions.
Oh, okay, that's a powerful image.
So when we're highly empathic, we sort of absorb the negative emotions of others.
Like a sponge soaking it all up.
And that can lead to burnout and stress and even vicarious trauma.
Especially in today's world where we're constantly bombarded with negative news and, social media.
It's a lot.
Yeah, it's easy to get overwhelmed.
So it's definitely something to be aware of, especially for people who are naturally more sensitive and empathic.
Right, we need to protect our own well-being.
But then how do we strike that balance?
That's the million-dollar question.
Between being empathetic and protecting ourselves.
Right. How do we know when we're crossing that line from healthy empathy into harmful over-empathy?
I think that's where understanding the difference between empathy and compassion becomes really crucial.
Okay, so what's the distinction?
Both the Healthy Gamer GG video and Cesare Warren's TED Talk really delve into this.
Interesting. Okay, so lay it on me. What's the difference?
So empathy is feeling what someone else feels.
Okay.
While compassion is having kindness and concern for them without necessarily taking on their emotional burden.
Right. So it's about creating space for someone to share their feelings.
Yes.
Without feeling like you have to absorb them all yourself.
I like that.
So you can be there for them without getting lost in their emotional world.
So it's like if your friend is going through a tough time, empathy would be feeling their sadness right along with them.
Okay.
Compassion would be offering support and understanding without getting overwhelmed by their sadness yourself.
Got it. So it's about finding that sweet spot.
Yes.
Between connection and healthy boundaries.
And speaking of boundaries, Robert Greene also had a cautionary note about empathy.
Oh, really? What did he say?
He warned about being wary of toxic people who might try to take advantage of our empathy.
Oh, that's a good point. Not everyone has good intentions, right?
Right.
Some people might try to manipulate our empathy for their own gain.
Yes, and discernment is key here.
Sure.
Recognizing when empathy is being reciprocated and when it's being exploited.
That's a tough lesson to learn sometimes.
Yeah, but important.
It really is.
And that leads us to another really important concept, perspective taking.
Okay, I'm listening.
Cesare Warren talks about this in his TED Talk, and he emphasizes how crucial it is for avoiding something he calls false empathy.
False empathy? I've never heard that term before.
So false empathy is when we think we're being empathetic,
Okay.
but we're actually just projecting our own assumptions onto the other person.
Oh, so we're not really seeing them for who they are.
Right. Our biases and preconceived notions get in the way, and we end up misunderstanding their situation.
And potentially doing more harm than good.
Exactly. So it's not enough to just imagine what it's like to be in their shoes.
We have to actually try to understand their perspective.
Even if it's totally different from our own.
Right, and that can be hard.
Yeah, especially when we're dealing with people from different backgrounds or cultures.
Absolutely.
Warren gave this really striking example in his talk about white teachers who struggled to connect with their black students because they didn't fully grasp the students' lived experiences with racism.
Oh, wow, that's powerful.
They assumed that their own understanding of the world was universal, and that created this huge disconnect.
Right, they weren't taking the time to really see things from the student's perspective.
Exactly, and I think that's a really important lesson for all of us.
Absolutely.
We need to be willing to challenge our own assumptions.
Yeah.
Acknowledge our blind spots, and be open to learning and growing from our interactions with others.
Even when it's uncomfortable.
When it's uncomfortable.
Because that's where the real growth happens.
Absolutely. So we've covered a lot of ground in this first part of our deep dive on empathy.
We have.
We've talked about what it is.
The neuroscience behind it.
The difference between empathy and compassion.
And the dangers of false empathy.
But now I think it's time to move on to the real heart of the matter.
Okay, I'm ready.
How do we actually put empathy into action in our everyday lives?
Let's do it.
Stay tuned for part 2.
Can't wait. Welcome back, everyone. So we've laid the groundwork, explored some of the complexities of empathy. But now let's shift gears a bit
Okay, I like it.
and talk about how we can actually cultivate this amazing ability in our everyday lives.
Yes, because I'm sure a lot of you are listening and thinking, okay, this is all fascinating,
Yeah.
but how do I actually become more empathetic?
Right. It's not always obvious.
Yeah.
But the good news is empathy, like any skill, can be developed and strengthened with practice.
So it's like learning a new language or an instrument.
Exactly. The more we use it, the more natural it becomes.
Okay, so where do we start?
Well, I think a good place to begin is with observation.
Observation, okay.
In our busy lives, we often forget to truly see the people around us.
Oh, that's so true.
We're so caught up in our own heads, our to-do lists, our phones,
Yeah,
that we miss those subtle cues that reveal what others are feeling.
I'm so guilty of that.
Me too. It's so easy to get caught up in our own little bubbles.
Yeah.
So the Life Hacker video really emphasized the importance of being more mindful, more present in our interactions, to really pay attention to people's body language,
Okay.
facial expressions, their tone of voice, and most importantly, resist the urge to judge or categorize them based on first impressions.
Okay, so approach each interaction with curiosity.
Exactly. Ask yourself, what's going on for this person?
What might they be feeling or thinking right now?
And then instead of jumping to conclusions, practice what Alexander Lyon calls active listening.
Oh, yes, active listening. Another gem from the Alexander Lyon video.
It's gold.
Tell me more.
So active listening is about moving beyond just passively hearing words and truly engaging with what the other person is saying.
Okay, so it's not just about waiting for your turn to speak.
Right. It's about showing them that you genuinely care about what they have to say.
So what are some of the key elements of active listening?
Well, first and foremost, giving the other person your undivided attention.
Putting your phone away, making eye contact.
Exactly. Those nonverbal cues are so important.
Okay, what else?
Asking clarifying questions to make sure you understand their perspective.
Okay.
And then reflecting back what you've heard to confirm you're on the same page.
So it's like a loop. You're listening, you're clarifying, and you're reflecting back.
Exactly. It creates this sense of understanding and connection.
And sometimes I think the most powerful form of active listening is just being present and offering a supportive silence.
Oh, that's a good point. Sometimes people just need someone to listen without judgment or offering solutions.
It's about creating that safe space for them to be vulnerable.
Right, and that can be incredibly powerful.
Yeah, it's a subtle but profound way to communicate empathy
Yeah.
and let someone know that they're not alone.
So we've talked about observation and active listening,
Yeah,
but cultivating empathy goes beyond just listening and observing, right?
okay. Where else do we need to go?
It's also about being open to learning from others, even when their experiences and perspectives differ from our own.
Oh, that's a tough one.
It can be challenging, especially when we encounter beliefs or values that clash with our own.
Yeah, but that's precisely when empathy becomes most crucial, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's easy to be empathetic with people who are similar to us, who share our values and beliefs. But the real test of empathy is being able to connect with people who see the world differently than we do.
I like that you said test, because it really is.
It is. It's a challenge, but it's also an incredible opportunity for growth.
So how do we avoid falling into the trap of false empathy that Cesare Warren talked about?
Remember, he emphasized the importance of perspective taking.
Right, stepping outside our own little bubbles.
Exactly. Trying to understand the world through someone else's eyes.
And that can be really uncomfortable sometimes.
Oh, yeah. It might mean challenging our own assumptions, acknowledging our blind spots.
Yeah.
Being willing to learn and grow from those interactions.
Yeah, and unlearning some things too, probably.
Absolutely. But it's so worth it.
It's a lifelong journey for sure.
It is, but it's one that enriches our understanding of the world and our place in it.
And it's the key to building bridges and fostering genuine connections.
As we've been looking at all these different sources, it struck me that there are so many different ways to cultivate empathy. Some are quite simple, like smiling at a stranger or offering a genuine compliment.
Oh yeah, those little acts of kindness.
Exactly.
They can make a big difference.
They really can. And then others require more effort and self-awareness.
Like what?
Like engaging in difficult conversations or actively seeking out diverse perspectives.
So it's a spectrum.
Exactly. There's no one-size-fits-all approach to empathy.
I like that.
What's important is finding practices that resonate with you
Right.
and incorporating them into your daily life.
It's like Robert Greene said, empathy is a muscle that needs regular exercise.
I love that analogy.
Yeah, the more we practice these strategies, the stronger our empathy muscles become, and the easier it becomes to connect with others on a deeper level.
And the more empathic we become, the more fulfilling and meaningful our relationships will be.
We'll be better equipped to navigate conflict, build trust, create connections that truly matter.
Empathy is not just about being nice.
Right.
It's about fostering understanding, compassion, and ultimately a more humane and interconnected world.
So as we move on to the final part of our deep dive,
Okay.
let's focus on the real-world impact of empathy. How does this concept play out in our professional lives, our personal relationships, and in society as a whole?
I'm excited to explore that.
Stay with us, because we're about to explore the transformative power of empathy in action. All right, so we're back. And, we spent this whole deep dive exploring empathy.
So we sure
We
have.
talked about what it is, how it works.
Even how too much of it can be a bad thing.
Yeah, too much of a good thing.
Yeah, exactly.
But now for the big question, why does all this matter?
Right, what's the point?
What difference does empathy actually make in our lives and the world around us?
That's the real question, isn't it?
It is. So I was thinking about that Justin McClung video with Simon Sinek. Specifically the story about Noah the barista who worked at both the Four Seasons and Caesar's Palace.
Oh, yeah, I remember that one.
What did you think about that?
Oh, it was so interesting, just to see the contrast between those two workplaces.
Yeah, and I thought it really highlighted the difference between a workplace where people feel valued and supported.
Versus just feeling like cogs in a machine.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it all seemed to boil down to the leadership.
Makes huge difference.
So at the Four Seasons, the managers genuinely cared about their employees.
Right.
They went out of their way to understand their perspectives and challenges.
Whereas at Caesar's Palace, it was all about catching people doing something wrong.
Yes.
It felt very punitive.
Exactly. And I thought that was just such a good example of how when leaders prioritize empathy,
It changes everything.
it creates this ripple effect throughout the organization.
People feel more connected, more motivated, more willing to go the extra mile.
And I think it's important to point out that it's not just about being nice.
Right.
It's about building a culture of trust and collaboration.
Where everyone feels empowered.
Yes, where everyone feels empowered to contribute their best work.
And there's actually data to back this up.
Oh, really? Tell me more.
Studies have shown that organizations with higher levels of empathy tend to be more successful.
So it's not just good for morale. It's good for business, too.
Exactly. It's a win-win.
And I think this applies beyond, the traditional office setting, too.
Oh, absolutely.
If you think about professions like healthcare and education,
Oh, yeah.
doctors, nurses, teachers, social workers,
All those folks.
they all work in fields where empathy is absolutely essential.
Couldn't agree more. Can you imagine going to a doctor who didn't listen to you
Listen,
or understand your concerns?
that would be horrible.
It would be a completely different experience.
It really would.
When doctors take the time to really listen to their patients, to understand their fears and anxieties,
Yeah.
it makes a world of difference in their recovery and overall well-being.
And the same goes for teachers.
Oh, 100%.
When students feel seen and understood by their teachers, they're more likely to thrive, academically and socially.
It creates that safe space for them to take risks, ask questions, truly engage in the learning process.
I love that safe space.
It's so important.
It is, and it all comes back to that sense of connection.
Yeah.
Whether we're talking about CEOs, managers, doctors.
Empathy is that key ingredient
Yes, for creating environments where people can flourish.
and reach their full potential.
All right, so let's shift gears a bit and talk about empathy in our personal relationships.
Okay, love this topic.
The Healthy Gamer G video made a really interesting point about how too much empathy can actually be detrimental to romantic relationships.
Oh, yeah, especially in the early stages.
So tell me more about that.
Well, they talked about how highly empathic people can kind of absorb their partner's negative emotions,
Oh, yeah.
which can lead to emotional contagion and potentially destabilize the relationship.
It's like that old saying, misery loves company.
Exactly. And while empathy is crucial in relationships,
Yeah,
finding that balance between connection and healthy boundaries is key.
right. We need to be there for our partners without losing ourselves in their emotional turmoil.
Support without getting swept away.
And that's where compassion comes in, right?
Right. Compassion allows us to care for others without necessarily taking on their emotional burden.
It's about offering kindness and understanding.
without getting overwhelmed ourselves.
So instead of mirroring our partner's sadness or anxiety,
Yeah.
we can approach them with loving detachment.
Offering support and encouragement without letting their negative emotions consume us.
Exactly.
And as the relationship progresses, empathy continues to play a vital role in building and maintaining intimacy.
Yeah. How so?
It's about truly seeing your partner, understanding their needs and desires, and responding with love and compassion.
It's not always easy, though.
Definitely not, especially when we're stressed or dealing with our own stuff.
Right. But it's so worth it.
100%.
Putting in the effort to understand and connect with our partner on a deeper level, that's where the magic happens.
That's the good stuff.
All right, so zooming out even further, let's consider the impact of empathy on society as a whole.
Okay, big picture thinking.
Yeah, because we've seen from the sources that empathy, or the lack thereof, can have profound consequences for how we interact with each other.
How we resolve conflicts.
Even how we address issues like prejudice and inequality.
It's all connected.
It really is, and I think Cesare Warren's TED Talk really highlighted this.
Oh, yeah.
He talked about how false empathy, where we project our own assumptions onto others, can actually perpetuate harm.
And reinforce existing power dynamics.
His example of the white teachers struggling to connect with their black students.
Because they couldn't fully grasp the students' lived experiences with racism.
That was so powerful.
It was, and it really underscores the importance of challenging our own biases.
Actively seeking out diverse perspectives.
And approaching each interaction with genuine curiosity and a willingness to understand.
Even when it's uncomfortable.
Even when it's uncomfortable.
Because true empathy has the power to bridge divides,
dismantle stereotypes,
and contribute to a more just and equitable world.
It's about recognizing our shared humanity, our interconnectedness, our responsibility to care for one another.
And that brings us full circle back to the heart of what we've been exploring this whole time.
Empathy matters.
Empathy matters.
Right.
It's not just a nice idea. It's a fundamental human capacity.
With the power to transform our lives and the world around us.
I loved that visual in Helen Reese's TEDx talk where she showed the brain scan of the woman experiencing pain.
Yeah.
And then she showed the scan of the same woman simply imagining her partner being in pain.
And the pain centers lit up in both scenarios.
It's just this powerful visual reminder that empathy isn't some abstract concept.
Our brains are literally wired for connection and compassion.
It's crucial for our individual and collective well-being.
It's the foundation of strong relationships, peaceful conflict resolution, and a more compassionate world.
So as you go about your day, your week, your life, remember the power of empathy.
Practice it, cultivate it, and let it guide your interactions with others.
Because as the Dalai Lama said, love and compassion are necessities, not luxuries.
Without them, humanity will not survive.
What a powerful quote.
It really is.
And on that note, we'll leave you to reflect on the role of empathy in your own life.
How will you choose to embody this powerful force?
What difference will you make?
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.
Until next time.